Today's text about hospitality and seating arrangements at a dinner party, it got me thinking about the myriad of etiquette rules and social protocols that I have stored up in my brain. Like, if someone does a favor for you, it's polite to return the favor or write a thank you card. If you receive a gift, a thank you card is often expected. It's polite to not be gross while eating. That's pretty basic. Don't begin eating until the host has started eating. Keep your mouth closed while you chew. Keep your napkin in your lap. Elbows off the table. I'm a huge person who does that all the time. Don't reach for things, ask for them to be passed. And try to avoid discussing inflammatory topics like politics or religion. At weddings or large parties, seating charts are made. And often a lot of thought goes into who sits where. Like, don't put Auntie Donna next to Cousin Diane because they still hate each other over a disagreement from a few years ago. Don't put your dad's boss next to your cousin Donald because he drinks too much and he spills all the family secrets. And definitely keep your ex-husband's sister away from his new wife. Why do we create and follow all of these rules? Mostly because it creates some sense of order. It gives us guidelines for what's polite and what is not. And the proper etiquette of thank you cards and favor returns cultivates a good sense of gratitude. You may or may not know of Emily Post. Does anyone know who Emily Post is? All right. I was worried. An etiquette writer. She is a very famous writer whose works, they were published in the early 1900s. And her best-selling book, Etiquette, it's still sold in its 19th edition on Amazon. And then there's the Emily Post Institute, and the entire Post family, they've published books on all sorts of etiquette. Etiquette at Work is one of the titles. Essential Manners for Men. Great Get-togethers, Casual Gatherings, and Elegant Parties at Home. Essential Manners for Couples. I didn't know couples had manners. Or, Do I Have to Wear White? Emily Post answers America's top wedding questions. Emily Post was often quoted at the dinner table at my house. My parents, they weren't super strict on table manners, but they wanted us to know what was polite and what was not. And my dad, he would often say, there is no polite way to eat spaghetti, which made me feel a lot less guilty when I had sauce all over my face. I was told to not try to slurp my soup too loud. I was also instructed to never cut a dinner roll with a knife. And my grandfather, he taught me how to set up silverware at a table. Silverware should be about an inch above the table edge, knife and spoon on the right, fork on the left, and the knife edge should be facing inward. And I find a lot of value in these cultural rules because they often help me out in situations with a lot of social pressure. And they help us blend in. And frankly, they give a really quick impression that we are good people. And if we follow these social rules, then we at least give a brief message to others about our character, that we are respectful, thoughtful people, and at least makes us appear like we know what we are doing. This brings us to our text for today. Our gospel reading from Luke shows Jesus at a dinner party. Jesus, he was invited to a lot of dinners in his 3 years of ministry, and I think he genuinely enjoyed them. His reputation was growing in good ways and bad, and people wanted to get to know him. And the leaders especially wanted to have him over, but mostly, as our text says, to watch him with suspicious eyes. Right before our text, Jesus had just healed on the Sabbath, just one of the many sacred rules that Jesus seemed to disregard. and we come to the setting of a party, a place where Jesus saw the potential for a lesson. It was often around a meal that Jesus saw potential for his mission on earth. And it's at this party that Jesus gives his host and fellow guests two unusual teachings. First, he says that when you're invited to a dinner party, do not sit in a place of honor or at the head of the table. It doesn't matter if you're best friends with the host or their most cherished relative or it's your birthday, don't take the honored seat. Instead, take a seat in the back. Why? Because it will bring you more honor when the host asks you to take the seat of honor in front of everybody. To me, this seems kind of like a political chess move. Be humble, but only so you can be honored later. And Jesus seems to just be encouraging a false kind of humility that only hopes to be rewarded with honor. And his next lesson seems even more backwards. He says, next time you host a banquet, don't invite people you know, like your relatives, friends, wealthy acquaintances. Instead, invite those who you know could never repay your act of hospitality. Invite those who don't have a home, those who are excluded because of how they look, those people who in Jesus' time were outcasts simply because they had some deformities of some kind. Now hang on, what is Jesus getting at here? A part of me is wondering if he had a little too much wine at this party. He's totally rewriting the etiquette rules. Forget thank you cards. Don't expect one. Invite people who you know won't be able to return the favor. Instead, invite complete strangers into your home. I don't know about y'all, but I can't remember the last time I invited a complete stranger into my home. And at first, these teachings, they sound pretty odd. And I'm pretty sure it didn't make much sense to the dinner guests who were within earshot. Because at this table, in this culture of Jesus' time, everyone operated within an honor and shame system. You see, everyone's goal was to gain as much honor as possible, often by inviting their friends and entertaining them. And then their friends would reciprocate and invite them into their home, and it would just keep going on and on. And when they did host their friends, they would make the most elaborate dishes that they could, show off whatever wealth they might have, talk about any friends they knew in high places. If they had children, they would try to arrange marriages for their children that would help elevate their social status. And their other goal was to avoid shame as much as possible. Situations like being asked to leave the seat of honor to go sit somewhere else were avoided at all costs. Public shame was especially the worst, because then it could affect their reputation down the line. If they had some sort of public shaming experience, then they might be turned down later in marriage arrangements or bartering. And Jesus, he had noticed the system by now. He was a pretty astute observer, and he attended a lot of dinner parties and drank a lot of wine, and he noticed how things operated. He observed what people valued the most, and he noticed who was left out. And he also noticed the flaws and the holes in this system. So when he told these lessons, he was speaking right into their values and that system that they followed. He knew his audience very well. You see, Jesus wasn't just giving them an etiquette lesson like Emily Post about where to sit, who to invite. He was speaking directly to the motivations behind their generosity. He was peering right into their motivation for hosting all of these dinners and parties, which was lying beneath a very thin veil of social convention. Because these people weren't just hosting a party just to be generous with their resources, they were hosting a party so they could receive honor in return. Generosity itself, it can come from many different places. Sometimes we give as a kind of unspoken investment, hoping our generosity will give us some credit in God's kingdom or give us some leverage to use in major decisions. Like those in our story today, they hosted parties to gain honor with their friends. Sometimes we give out of a sense of duty because we have to, we're supposed to. Sometimes we're generous just so we can feel better than other people. But as Jesus points out, our giving, it's not supposed to be a transaction where we give something and expect something in return. We're supposed to give freely, not expect any reward, and give because we can't help it. The only motivation for our generosity should be that the God we worship is a generous God, and that giving is a practice of our faith. Now, this idea that giving is not a transaction goes completely against the system of Jesus' time. And if you think about it, that system of honor and shame, it still kind of lingers in our society. It's not nearly as prevalent as 2,000 years ago. We don't have arranged marriages or bartering based on reputation, but it's still there, like a very strong undercurrent that we don't see. You see, all of these rules for etiquette, the rules that help guide us in social situations and save face, they all help us avoid shame and embarrassment of some kind on a micro level. Knowing all these little rules that Emily Post created can cut us a break and quickly give our reputation a positive spin. I mean, thank you cards exist because we want to cultivate a sense of gratitude, but also because we want to keep our sense of honor with the person who gave us the gift. When I forget to send a thank you card in a timely manner, it haunts me because I am sure now that that person thinks I am terrible. I feel like I've lost my honor with that person. I remember after my wedding, I forgot to send 2 thank you cards to people, and those 2 people told my mother that they didn't like me anymore. It's a lot. And if someone has us over for dinner, we sometimes put this pressure on ourselves to return the favor to them. And if we have someone over for dinner and they never offer to return the favor, we can sometimes hold a grudge without realizing it. This politeness, it's so ingrained in us, partially because it helps treat others with dignity, which is very important. Don't get me wrong. But it also reinforces this cycle of honor and shame. And this honor and shame system, it creates motivations for generosity that are slightly unsavory. If we spend our entire lives trying to gain honor and keep it, and to avoid feeling shamed, if we spend all of our effort, all of our focus on trying to fit in, on trying to blend in, and trying to constantly repay others for their favors and good deeds, then I am afraid that we are missing out on a huge part of our faith. Because if we live that way, we are constantly looking inward, constantly focused on ourselves, perhaps without realizing it. Our perspective remains so narrow that we don't see others who might need our help. Other people who can't repay us, but need help that we are able to provide. And if we are constantly trying to keep our scores even with others, then we will never give generously without any thought of reward. We will always be giving with the reward in mind. We will always be trying to pay off our IOUs and keep our honor. Meanwhile, there might be someone in need right in front of you. What's more is that this honor culture, it's telling us a lie about our own worth. Because no matter where we sit at the table, if we are at the seat of honor, if we are next to a friend, next to a spouse, or if we're stuck at the edge of the table, which is the worst because my kneecap always finds the leg, Or if we're not invited to the party at all, it doesn't matter, because we are all honored guests in God's kingdom. We shouldn't practice hospitality with any reward in mind, and I know that's a lot easier said than done. Giving of our time and our resources, it should not be viewed as a transaction. Instead, we invite people into our home and feed them a meal because they might need community. They might need friendship. They might need a place to rest. There are certain saints in our lives who we know do this so well. For me, it's my mother-in-law. Hospitality is honestly one of her spiritual gifts, and over the years, I've observed her and taken notes, because hospitality does not come as easily to me. And it really helps that she's an amazing cook. If I've ever come to a church gathering and brought green beans, that's her recipe. It's amazing. And one of her traditions is an Easter dinner, but she intentionally invites those who don't have family in town or those who live alone, because she doesn't want them to be alone on such a family-centric holiday. And this ragtag bunch of individuals has a meal together. A lot of us don't know each other at this dinner, and together we hunt for Easter eggs and we play the game of peep jousting, which is where you poke marshmallow peeps with toothpicks, put them in the microwave, and watch them fight. If you haven't heard of that, you should play it. There is no seating chart at this dinner. There's no seat of honor. Just a community of people who miss their family or miss their loved ones, but they find family at this dinner in her house. And that is her goal when she invites people over. And that's how it should be, really. A group of people around a table, enjoying a meal, enjoying fellowship with each other, united in that they are all God's beloved. There's no jockeying for the seat of honor. No one is thinking about how to repay their host or how to keep their social score up to snuff. It's just Holy Communion together. That's the kind of hospitality that God calls us to provide. I encourage us all here today to seek out hospitality as a spiritual practice, especially if it doesn't come easy for you, and especially to those who can't repay the favor. It's like our passage from Hebrews says, some of us may entertain angels without knowing it. May it be so. Amen.